Hello again, football fans. This is Anthony coming at you from Two Fat Guys Fantasy Football. Today we're going to be taking a look at the second of our two teams in the doubleheader, and that's going to be the Atlanta Falcons. As always, we're going to jump right into it, take a look at what the roster looked like at the end of the season. So this is a roster that many thought wasn't very good from top to bottom last year. Nobody was expecting a lot from, and it kind of played out that way. Um, Ended up earning the eighth pick in the draft. But at the end of the season, we had some some nice things to look forward to. Marcus Mariota started the season as the starting quarterback. Through the course of the year, Desmond Ritter did come in and played pretty well, at least comparably to what Mariota did. So it gave them signs of they might have something working. So Desmond Ritter coming out of Cincinnati last year was a good quarterback. He played really well for Cincinnati. Not a whole lot of weaknesses in his game. When they signed Mariota last year, I thought it was a good move for them because they are very similar type quarterbacks. I thought Mariota could be a nice mentor for him, and I think that actually played out. It taught him a little bit how to be a pro, so that when was able to come in and get a few starts, he played pretty well. Didn't make the big mistakes, didn't show a whole lot of panic. So he played well. Last year, in the first round they drafted Drake London, the first wide receiver off the board. Uh, Drake London came out of USC and wasn't my number one rated wide receiver, but he came in and he actually, according to all the metrics and the analytics and the tape I watched, actually played really well last year. He was one of the best rookie wide receiver according to the metrics, even though the statistics and the final stats may not show that. But he shows a lot of value and a lot of things to offer in his skill set. I mean, he's 6'4", 220. He ran well enough for his size, gives him a couple of jump ball threats to go along with Kyle Pitts, who was taken the year prior. 6'6", 245, and an athletic monster. He is a mismatch nightmare for teams. He's too big for most corners. He's too fast for most linebackers. So you've got to make a plan for him as long as he can stay healthy. Unfortunately, he missed some games last year, so we didn't really get to see everything work out exactly how we wanted it to. Cordero Patterson is a nice piece at running back. Starting to get older, we're starting to see some of that explosiveness not be exactly there anymore. They did draft Tyler Algier as well last year out of BYU. Um, he played pretty well last year. He looked really good when he was called upon. Um, he, I think he's one of those running backs from last year's class that's good, not great, and I think he can actually be marginalized by the guys coming in this year if they decide to go that route. Their offensive line is solid. Corey Lindstrom, one of the best guards in the league. Jake Matthews is a longtime left tackle. He still plays pretty well. Doesn't give up a lot, but is not an overpowering, terrifying threat anymore. But he does do pretty well. Caleb McGarry is another guy. He's relatively young when it comes to offensive line. He's been around for a few years, um, and he just continued to get better through the course of the year and ended up uh, having a good season in terms of an offensive lineman. The rest of their wide receivers, Olamide Zaccheaus, is an interesting guy. I think he played very well last year. He was a nice complement in that wide receiver room. And then Demir Bird, they're not great. Outside of London and Kyle Pitts, I just don't think they're all that scary at receiver. Cordero Patterson coming out of the backfield as well, but they need some help in the pass catcher department. Their defensive line, Grady Jarrett has been a fixture there for a while. Is a great 3-4 end. He could be a 4-3 tackle. He's just however you want to line him up, he's going to play well. He's just he's just a good, solid down lineman for you. They drafted Ebikiti last year out of Penn State. I think I butchered the name, but I liked this pick for them. He was an underrated pass rusher coming into the draft last year, and scored out really well. And I think they're really expecting him to take the next step this year. Um, but yeah, I think he's a guy that could come in and be really good for them going forward. AJ Terrell, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Casey Hayward was brought in to be a nice veteran complement. Played well, but overall the secondary needed some help. The safety room, Richie Grant, J- Jalen Hawkins. Jalen Hawkins is getting better. Um, Still has room to improve, and we'll see if he can actually take that next step. Not a guy that I was super high on when he came into the league, and hasn't gotten better by leaps and bounds either. The linebacker room, Rashawn Evans is a big hitting middle linebacker, good run stopper. That's about it. Kwiatkowski is also kind of just a good tackling machine. Um, Kind of is always in the right place, but doesn't offer anything. He doesn't do anything great. Lorenzo Carter has been around for a while now. Um, he's kind of good, not great. He's a good pass rusher. He's a good run stopper, but he's not great at any one thing. Doesn't really excel at any one thing. So he's a piece that could be improved upon as well. They did draft D'Angelo Malone as well. He's a guy that could come in, and if he can take that next step, I think he could replace Lorenzo Carter. I think that's what they're expecting from him. So interesting piece. Again, really, really fast, coming off the edge, but he's a guy that was a little raw coming in, needed some time to develop, and we'll see if he can take that next step. So overall, last year the roster performed about as well as anybody expected it to, and they earned another top 10 pick in this year's draft. So let's take a look at what has changed for them since the beginning of free agency. Um, this is a roster that has gotten better through the course of free agency. Um, Mariota was let go. Now it is Desmond Ritter's show, and they have said that it is Desmond Ritter's show. They've said publicly that they are not in the quarterback market. Again, it is lying season in the NFL, so I don't know if I should believe them or not. But everything that I've seen publicly and close to the team has said that they fully expect to go into the season with Desmond Ridder as the starter and Taylor Heineke as the backup, who can earn a chance to start if Ridder struggles. Drake London is still the leader of that wide receiver room, but they brought in some help this year. I think they improved their wide receiver room quite a bit. They brought in Mac Hollins and Scotty Miller. Mac Hollins is another guy in that now that they've got the three towers. He's 6'4", 220. Played really well with the Raiders last year. So he's a guy that I expect to come in and offer another threat on the outside. And then something that this wide receiver room didn't have before was just a pure kind of speed guy, and that's what Scotty Miller brings. He's a burner. I think he was underutilized in Tampa. Maybe he didn't have a great connection with Tom Brady. So I hope that he can catch on here and have a chance to revitalize his career. He's a guy that offers some unique skills, and I think can do some good things. They did upgrade a little bit on the offensive line. They brought in Hennessy. He's a good guard. He's a young guard. He's going to continue to get better. Corey Lindstrom was brought back. Caleb McGarry was brought back. So they invested in their offensive line and made sure that the guys that they had kind of stayed put. Kyle Pitts is still the undisputed leader in the tight end room, but they did bring in Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith is going to be more of a blocker for them. He does block significantly better than Kyle Pitts, but he's a guy that does offer you some skills in the receiver game too. He can be a nice block and release guy. It's going to allow him to run some 12 formation, and he's an interesting piece. I was kind of questioning the addition of him, especially for fantasy, but I don't think it really takes away from Kyle Pitts' value at the tight end. I think Pitts is still the receiver, and Jonnu Smith is there more for blocking purposes. So Jonnu Smith was an addition that I think is really good for football, but not so great for fantasy football. Kyle Pitts is still the guy. Drake London is still the guy. The other guys I wouldn't really invest highly in, maybe in a deep league. At running back, like I said, we still have Patterson, we still have Algier, and what I said about Tyler Algier still holds true. I think he is a guy that could be marginalized by a rookie from this year's class. This year's running back class is very deep and very good. So I think that's a position they actually could address um, on day two or even day three and get a guy that can push Algier. Uh, on defense, this is where some changes have been made. Two big additions. One just is big in a couple of ways. Calais Campbell. Calais Campbell is a giant human being, and he brings something to that defense that they have lacked, and that's a real veteran presence and some real strength and toughness. Calais Campbell, he may be older, but he has shown no signs of slowing down. Unfortunately, was a cap casualty, so he was let go from Baltimore. But he brings in a lot of skills to that defensive line, and is going to make that a lot better. They've also brought in David Onyemata to be the nose tackle. He's solid. He's a big guy, and this defensive front got significantly better with those two additions. On the back end, they brought in Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates is one of the best safeties in the league. He's been with Cincinnati and has been a real strong piece for them in their defense and in their runs of late. So I'll be interested to see what else the Bengals do to replace him. But for now, for the Falcons side of it, he's going to help their defense a lot. Um, Troy Anderson was drafted last year. And he's a guy that I expect to see a lot from this year. I liked him a lot as a later round guy. He's he was a little raw, but he has the athletic qualities to be a quality middle linebacker in this league for a very, very long time. Michael Walker, um, interesting guy. Um, Good, not great. Can continue to get better because he is young. I like him. I don't love him, but for for what they've done, this front seven has gotten significantly better. Um, Malone, Ebikite, both can take the next steps to become those pass rushers. Lorenzo Carter, at the very least, is a nice depth guy. We still have Jalen Hawkins, who, if he can continue to improve, will help out. In in the quarterback room, we brought in Mike Hughes to be the third quarter, which helps them out immensely. Um, he's a guy that is significantly better than what they had last year, and I think helps out quite a bit. So overall, I like this team a lot more now than I did at the end of the season. They're a team that got significantly better, albeit some of these additions are shorter term deals. So they will need to keep making these kinds of moves. But I like what they've done. I think they're in a much better spot. And in the NFC South, it's fair game. You can make an argument that they have as good a chance as anybody to win the NFC South. So I like what they've done. And to that end, they also have the eighth pick in the draft. So with that, there's a lot of different things you can do. Um, we've talked a lot about the top end of the draft, but they're in play. They could go a lot of different ways, and I'm interested to see they could be one of the first real pivot points uh, for this draft. So I'm sure I'm not sure what they're gonna do. I'm just not. Um, I'd like to think that as we get closer to the draft, I'll get a little more clarity. Um, but they could go really any way they want to. They're a team that has done kind of what I think most of the best teams in the NFL do, and that's really plug your holes that you had at the end of the regular season, so that you're not forced to draft on position alone in the NFL draft. I think they've done that. They don't have any glaring holes that need to be addressed. So they're really in a spot to take the best player available, whoever that may end up being for them. Um, it could be Christian Gonzalez. You could bring him in to probably play day one. Maybe push Hughes, maybe push Hayward. You could bring in Devin Witherspoon if that's your speed. You could bring in any of the pass rushers. Like I said, you could Nolan Smith would be in play for them. Um, you could bring in Jalen Carter. He's if he's there, if he's cleared on your board, he's a guy you could bring in. Um, Lucas Van Ness, if that's what you want to do. Tyree Wilson. Any of these guys are in play. They could even take, an offensive lineman if that's what they wanted to do. I don't think it's necessarily what you would need to do, but like I said, I don't think the positional value is there for them at 8 to take like a Jackson Smith and Jiba, but maybe. I, I really they're completely open. They could surprise everybody and take a quarterback. Uh, For me, I kind of expect them to take a corner. I think that's going to be the best positional value for them. I think Christian Gonzalez is probably the guy. Um, but my other thought for them would be Tyree Wilson. I think it's down to uh, for my evaluations. I think it's coming down to Wilson or Gonzalez. So let's dive into Wilson just a little bit and just see what they could get. Tyree Wilson is a guy who's going to come in and be what Calais Campbell kind of is. Um, and learning from Calais Campbell would be great for him. He's got incredible length. It's been kind of beaten into everybody's heads that watches pre-draft coverage how long his wingspan is. So he's got incredible length at that. He brings some pass rush skills. He's got good speed. He's got good strength. Again, for me, he could develop into be what Calais Campbell currently is. So I think that would be an interesting spot for him to end up. Um, like I said, my other spot that I'm leaning is in corner in Christian Gonzalez. Christian Gonzalez brings that ideal size. He's 6'1", great speed, um, good in man, good in press, better in man than zone. He's a man corner. He'd line up across, I think, from AJ Terrell on day one and uh, be that guy. I think he's a guy that would really strengthen that. And instead of making it a solid cornerback group, I think it could make it a special cornerback group. And that's a good spot to be in. It's nice to be able to know that you don't have to change your scheme to cover guys. That you've got guys that are out there that you can just run. That, your base nickels. You don't have to go with exotic things to cover some of these wide receiver threats that are out there in the NFL these days. So I think Christian Gonzalez is where I'm leaning at this point, but Tyree Wilson wouldn't surprise me either. Honestly, Jalen Carter wouldn't surprise me either, uh, as long as they're okay with his off the field. He doesn't get red flagged and taken off their board. Jalen Carter could potentially be, were it not for the off the field red flags, the number one player in this class. But there's some questions, and a lot of teams are still digging into him and doing their homework on him. But he's a guy that I like a lot as a player, but I'm not sure that I would want my team to draft him just because of the question marks surrounding him. So, um, all in all, the Falcons are a team that has already gotten a lot better. I think they're already in play for the NFC South. They're going to push some teams there, and it's going to be interesting. The draft, they could shake things up in the draft. They could be one of those teams that, if the quarterbacks are still there, maybe they trade back for somebody that wants to move up and just get some additional draft capital and just stockpile it and keep getting better. So the Falcons are a good team. They're better now than they were when the season ended, and they're a team that I like a lot, and I'm curious to see how they perform this year. But for me, that's it for the Falcons. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. Feedback is always encouraged and wanted. But if you have an idea on who we should take a look at next, drop it in the comments. We'll take a look, and we're going to get through all 32 teams before the start of the NFL draft. But for now, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.